You can sit in a crowded room, surrounded by conversations, laughter, and noise, and still feel like you're observing rather than participating. Not because you don't understand people, but because something inside you filters, questions, and slows everything down. This is the hidden conflict of people who rarely socialize. On one side, there's a natural desire for connection, to be seen and understood. On the other, there's an equally strong need to protect your mental space, your energy, and your sense of self. And over time, that protection can quietly become a pattern. One of the first things to understand is that people who socialize less often aren't necessarily antisocial. They're highly selective. You don't avoid people because you dislike them. You avoid interactions that feel shallow, forced, or emotionally draining. Small talk can feel like performing without purpose. Conversations that stay on the surface rarely satisfy you, so instead of engaging halfway, you often choose not to engage at all. For example, when someone asks you how your weekend was, you might give a short answer, not because you don't have more to say, but because you sense they're not really asking. This selectivity is closely tied to a second psychological pattern, heightened internal processing. Your mind doesn't just register experiences, it analyzes them, replays them, and tries to understand them deeply. After a social interaction, you might revisit what you said, how you said it, and how it may have been perceived. This constant reflection can make socializing feel exhausting, not in the moment, but afterward. A simple conversation can turn into hours of mental review, which gradually teaches you that silence is easier than analysis. Because of this, you begin to develop a stronger relationship with solitude, not as a fallback, but as a preferred state. Being alone doesn't feel empty, it feels clear. There's no pressure to respond, perform, or adjust yourself. You can think in complete thoughts without interruption. This is why staying home often feels more appealing than going out, even when you like the people involved. It's not about avoiding them, it's about preserving the environment where your mind works best. But there's another layer beneath this preference, a subtle sensitivity to emotional dynamics. You tend to pick up on tone shifts, body language, and unspoken tension more quickly than others. In group settings, this can feel overwhelming. You might notice when someone is uncomfortable, when a joke doesn't land, or when the mood changes slightly. While others move on, you stay aware. This constant awareness can make social spaces feel unpredictable, leading you to limit how often you place yourself in them. Over time, this sensitivity can shape how you view connection itself. You may begin to associate socializing with emotional risk rather than reward. Not because something dramatic happened, but because of repeated small moments, being misunderstood, feeling out of sync, or realizing that expressing yourself fully doesn't always lead to being understood. So instead of forcing connection, you wait for it to feel natural, and when it doesn't, you withdraw quietly. This withdrawal isn't always conscious. It often shows up as postponing plans, declining invitations, or telling yourself you'll socialize when you feel like it. But what's really happening is that your threshold for meaningful interaction has become higher than what most situations offer. For instance, you might cancel plans, not because you're tired, but because you anticipate the conversation won't go beyond the surface. And that anticipation alone is enough to make staying home feel like the better choice. As this pattern continues, your identity can begin to shift. You might start to see yourself as not a social person, even though that's only partially true. The deeper truth is that you are social, but only under the right conditions. You value depth over frequency, quality over quantity, and authenticity over convenience. However, because those conditions aren't always available, your behavior can look like avoidance from the outside. There's also a quiet independence that develops in people who rarely socialize. You become comfortable relying on yourself for emotional regulation, decision-making, and even entertainment. While this independence can be empowering, it can also reduce your motivation to seek out others. If you can process your own thoughts, solve your own problems, and enjoy your own company, the urgency for connection decreases. Not because you don't need people, but because you've learned how to function without them. At the same time, this independence can create a subtle barrier. The longer you rely solely on yourself, the harder it becomes to reintroduce others into your inner world. Sharing your thoughts can feel like simplifying something complex. Explaining your emotions can feel like translating a language that doesn't fully capture what you experience. So instead of risking that loss of depth, you keep things to yourself. Another important insight is that people who socialize less often tend to value emotional safety over spontaneity. You're less likely to jump into new social situations without knowing what to expect. Uncertainty isn't exciting, it's draining. You prefer environments where you understand the dynamics, where conversations feel intentional, and where you don't have to constantly adjust. This is why you may stick to a small circle or none at all. It's not about limiting your world, it's about maintaining stability within it. And yet, despite all of this, the desire for meaningful connection doesn't disappear. It just becomes quieter, more selective, and sometimes harder to act on. You might find yourself wanting deeper conversations, but not knowing where to find them, or wanting to feel understood, but hesitating to open up because past experiences have taught you that not everyone will meet you there. What makes this psychology complex is that it's not a problem to be fixed. It's a pattern to be understood. There is nothing inherently wrong with socializing less. In many ways, it reflects self-awareness, emotional depth, and a refusal to engage in what feels inauthentic. But when the pattern becomes rigid, it can limit opportunities for connection that might actually align with who you are. So the shift isn't about forcing yourself to be more social. It's about recognizing the difference between protecting your energy and isolating yourself from experiences that could enrich you. It's about noticing when you're avoiding something because it lacks depth, and when you're avoiding something simply because it requires vulnerability. Because the truth is, meaningful connection doesn't always announce itself clearly. Sometimes it starts in ordinary conversations, in unexpected moments, in interactions that don't seem significant at first. And if your filter becomes too strict, you might miss the beginnings of something that could have grown into what you were looking for. In the end, being someone who rarely socializes isn't a limitation. It's a reflection of how carefully you choose where to place your attention, your energy, and your presence. The goal isn't to change that, it's to understand it well enough that it works for you, not against you. If this video helped you understand yourself a little better, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore the hidden psychology behind everyday life.